The footprints of Zakopane. The snow had been falling for 3 days straight when Marek first saw them. He stood at the edge of the restricted zone, his breath forming small clouds in the frozen air, and stared at the impressions that cut through the pristine white surface like wounds. The tracks were massive, easily twice the size of his own boots, and shaped in a way that made his stomach turn. Not quite human. Not quite animal. Something in between, or perhaps something that refused to be categorized at all. What disturbed him most was where they began. Marek had been a forest ranger in the Tatra Mountains for 11 years, and he had seen his share of strange things in the wilderness. Hikers who had wandered off marked trails and were never found. Trees that grew in spiral patterns for no apparent reason. Nights when the silence became so complete, it felt like being sealed inside a tomb. But he had never seen anything like this. The tracks simply appeared in the middle of an open clearing, as if whatever made them had dropped from the sky or materialized out of nothing. He walked a wide circle around them, searching for some explanation, some point of origin he had missed. There was none. The snow around the first print was undisturbed, perfect, virginal. Then the footprint, pressed deep into the powder, and then another, leading toward the dense wall of spruce trees that marked the beginning of the old forest. The old forest. Even the name made him uneasy. This section of the Tatras had been closed to the public since 1981 roku, after 3 separate incidents that the authorities had never fully explained. Marek had read the reports when he first took this posting. Disappearances. Rescue teams that came back without their memories of what happened. Oneman Wuchao stumbled out of the trees after 6 days, unable to speak, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. He had died in the hospital 2 weeks later, still silent. Marek had never been into the old forest. No one had, not officially, not for years. His job was to patrol the perimeter, to make sure no curious hikers or rebellious teenagers crossed the boundary. It was boring work, usually, which was exactly how he liked it. He had a small cabin a kilometer back down the mountain, a radio that barely worked, and enough books to last the winter. He was supposed to check in with headquarters every 3 days. He was not supposed to investigate anything unusual. He was not supposed to enter the restricted zone under any circumstances. He looked at the tracks again. They were fresh, made sometime in the last few hours. The edges were still sharp, not yet softened by wind or new snow. Whatever had made them was close. Marek turned away and began walking back toward his cabin. The wind picked up, carrying with it a smell he could not identify. Something organic, something old. His pace quickened involuntarily, and he hated himself for it. He was 43 years old, a grown man, a professional. He did not run from shadows. But when he heard the sound behind him, a soft crunching of snow that matched his own footsteps with perfect timing, he did not turn around. He kept his eyes forward, his breathing steady, and he walked faster. The cabin appeared through the trees like a prayer answered. Marek climbed the steps, went inside, and locked the door behind him. Only then did he allow himself to look back through the small window. Nothing. Just trees and snow and the dying light of afternoon. He built a fire, made tea, and tried to read. The words swam on the page. Outside, darkness fell like a curtain, absolute and suffocating. The forest at night was never truly quiet. There were always sounds. Wind through branches, the distant call of an owl, the crack of ice forming on tree bark. But tonight, there was nothing. The silence was total, oppressive, as if the world had stopped breathing. Marek put down his book and listened. After a while, he heard it. A scraping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from somewhere outside. Not close, but not far either. Like something heavy being dragged across frozen ground. It continued for perhaps a minute, then stopped. Then started again, from a different direction. Then stopped. Then started again, closer. He went to the window and pressed his face against the cold glass. The darkness beyond was impenetrable. He had a flashlight, but something told him not to use it, not to announce his presence any more than necessary. He stood there for a long time, watching nothing, listening to the scraping sound as it circled his cabin in a smooth, patient spiral. Eventually, it stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. Marek did not sleep that night. He sat in his chair by the dying fire, the flashlight in his lap, and waited for dawn. When the first grey light finally crept through the window, he felt a relief so profound it made him dizzy. He opened the door and stepped outside. The tracks were everywhere. They circled the cabin in concentric rings, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all those massive inhuman prints pressed deep into the snow. They came right up to his door, stopped, and then retreated. They approached from every angle, layer upon layer, a record of something that had spent the entire night walking around and around his small shelter, getting closer with each circuit but never quite reaching the threshold. And at the center of the largest circle, directly in front of his door, there was a shape pressed into the snow. Not a footprint. Something else. It took him a moment to understand what he was seeing. A handprint. Human sized. With 6 fingers. Marek stood there for a long time, staring at it. Then he went back inside, gathered his things, and prepared to leave. He would hike back to the main station, report what he had found, and request a transfer. He did not care how it would look. He did not care about his reputation. He just wanted to be away from this place, away from those tracks, away from the old forest and whatever walked there. He locked the cabin, shouldered his pack, and started down the mountain trail. The tracks were waiting for him. They crossed the trail about 100 meters from his cabin, fresh and deep. But these were different. These were coming back, leading up the mountain, toward the old forest. And next to them, running parallel, was a second set of tracks. Smaller. Human sized. His own boots. Marek stopped walking. He looked down at his feet, at the snow beneath them, at the trail behind him. His own footprints were clear and obvious. But there, running alongside the massive tracks, was another set of his prints, made at the same time, heading in the opposite direction. He had not walked that way. He had not gone toward the forest. He had come from his cabin, which was downhill, and these tracks went uphill. They could not be his. But they were. The tread pattern was identical. The size, the depth, the spacing of the stride. Everything matched perfectly. Marek began to run. He did not remember making the decision. On a moment he was standing there, staring at the impossible tracks, and the next he was sprinting down the trail, his pack bouncing against his back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The trees blurred past him. The trail twisted and turned. He ran for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, and when he finally stopped, hands on his knees, lungs burning, he looked back up at the mountain. The old forest was closer than it should have been. He had been running downhill, away from the restricted zone, but somehow the dark wall of ancient trees now loomed larger in his vision, as if he had been running toward it instead. That was impossible. He knew this trail. He had walked it 100 times. But there it was, the old forest, vast and silent and waiting. Marek pulled out his compass. The needle spun lazily, refusing to settle. He checked his watch. The hands had stopped at 3:14, though he could not remember what time it actually was. The sun was hidden behind thick clouds, giving no hint of direction or hour. He started walking again, forcing himself to move calmly, deliberately. He counted his steps. He watched the trees carefully, looking for landmarks he recognized. After a while, he saw the twisted pine that marked the halfway point of the trail. Relief washed over him. He was going the right way. He would be at the main station before dark. But when he reached the twisted pine, he saw something that made his vision swim. Tracks. His tracks. Leading away from the tree in 3 different directions. One said going downhill, toward safety. One said going uphill, toward the old forest. And one said going sideways, of the trail, into the deep snow where none would ever walk. All of them fresh. All of them his. Marek stood very still. He did not want to move anymore. He did not want to make a decision. Because somehow, in a way he could not understand and did not want to accept, his decisions did not matter. He had been walking for hours, and he had not moved at all. Or he had moved in every direction simultaneously. Or there were multiple versions of him, each one making a different choice, each one leaving tracks in the snow. That was when he heard the breathing. Not his own. Deeper. Slower. Coming from behind him. He turned around. The trail behind him was empty. But there, at the edge of his vision, just where the trees grew to see clearly, something stood. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Marek did not move. Definitely the edge of the trees did not move. They regarded each other across the small distance, predator and prey, though Marek was no longer certain which was which. Then Devin took a step forward, and Marek saw its foot come down in the snow. The print was massive. Twice the size of a human foot. Not quite human. Not quite animal. Exactly like the tracks he had been following. Exactly like the tracks he had been making. The realization came slowly, unwillingly, like waking from a nightmare only to find that you are still asleep. Marek looked down at his own feet, at the tracks he had left behind. Then he looked at his hands. 6 fingers on the left. 5 on the right. He spread them wide, watching them in the grey light. Had it always been that way? He could not remember. He tried to picture his own hands from yesterday, from last week, from before the snow started falling, but the memories slid away like water. The breathing grew closer. He looked up. There was nothing at the edge of the trees. There had never been anything. Just shadows and silence and the old forest, patient as stone. Marek turned and walked into the trees. His footprints followed behind him, large and small, human and not, appearing from nowhere and leading to nowhere, circling and crossing and multiplying in the snow. Somewhere deep in the old forest, other tracks were being made, other versions of himself were walking other trails, each one believing they were escaping, each one walking deeper into the heart of something that had no heart at all. The restricted zone closed around him like a fist. 3 days later, a new ranger was sent to check on the cabin. He found it locked and empty, the fire long dead. Outside, the snow was covered in tracks, thousands of them, all sizes and shapes, radiating out from the cabin in every direction like the threads of a web. He did not stay long. He reported what he saw, and headquarters added another note to the file. The old forest remained closed. The boundary remained patrolled. And sometimes, on clear nights when the wind is still, hikers on the lower trails report seeing lights moving through the trees above the restricted zone. The lights move in circles, smooth and methodical, as if searching for something. As if still searching. As if they will always be searching. In the old forest, the snow never stops falling. The tracks never disappear. And somewhere in that white silence, Marek is still walking, still trying to find his way home, still leaving footprints that begin nowhere and end nowhere, forever circling the summer frozen ground. Watching himself. Hunting himself. Becoming himself. Again and again and again.